Did you know a president tried to impeach a Supreme Court justice? We're going to talk about how President Thomas Jefferson tried to impeach Supreme Court Justice Samuel Chase. So during the Washington Adams administrations, the judicial branch was predominantly Federalist, but that was going to change when Thomas Jefferson came to office. There were some radical Republicans who wanted to get rid of the judicial branch altogether, but Thomas Jefferson, he was more moderate about the situation. He did, however, wanted to remove justices who were blatantly partisan on the bench. He had very bad memories during the Adams administration during the Sedition Act. The first judge on Thomas Jefferson's impeachment list was Federal District Judge John Pickering of New Hampshire. John Pickering drafted the New Hampshire Constitution and was a very capable lawyer, but he had a somewhat of a nervous disorder, and to remedy that, he drank a lot. Now, impeaching John Pickering wasn't Thomas Jefferson's first choice because he tried to offer different ways out. However, family didn't want John Pickering to retire because they didn't want the burden of caring for him full time. And there was, at the time, Federalist Senator of New Hampshire, William Plummer, who didn't want John Pickering to retire because he knew if John Pickering retired, then his arch rival would take his place, who was a Republican. John Pickering ultimately did get impeached, but it was a matter of how could he be impeached. The Constitution said that a judge can be impeached only by treason, bribery, or crimes and high crimes and misdemeanors. John Pickering's insanity and alcoholism was classified as misdemeanors because an intoxicated judge would not be making sound decisions, giving out judgments. There were many reasons why Thomas Jefferson wanted to impeach Samuel Chase. May 2nd, 1803, in Baltimore, Maryland, Samuel Chase tried to alliterate his whole apocalyptic vision of Republicans taking over the government to the grand jury when the Republicans repealed the Sedition Act of 1802. Samuel Chase condemned universal suffrage and equal rights. During the Sedition Act, on the Supreme Court, Samuel Chase was the justice who gave out the most severe punishment of all the justices. There was a newspaper editor named James Madison who was found guilty during the Sedition Act, and Samuel Chase, as he was known for, handed out a pretty harsh punishment to the newspaper writer. Now, for context, James Callender, he was the one who exposed Alexander Hamilton and Maria Reynolds' affair. And so, yeah, he was the kind of guy who really loved gossip. Here's the funny thing about the Samuel Chase impeachment trial. While Aaron Burr, who was vice president, was charged for murder of Alexander Hamilton, he was the one presiding over it. The Samuel Chase impeachment trial was on February 4th, 1805, and Justice Samuel Chase, he had a legal strategy. John Randolph of Roanoke, he had his own legal strategy, but it was very unfortunate for him that he wasn't a lawyer. He argued that he was going to prove that Justice Samuel Chase had repeatedly and with political intent perverted the federal judiciary with overbearing and biased rulings. Unfortunately for John Randolph, there were 52 witnesses who were sworn in to testify, and they could not give a testimony that supported his arguments of impeachment. To make matters even worse, renowned Attorney General from Maryland, Luther Martin, was one of Samuel Chase's lawyers. So when Luther Martin appeared to speak February 23rd, the galleries were jam-packed with people because everybody wanted to hear him speak. And Luther Martin, being the lawyer genius that he is, he immediately singled out two of the Constitution framers out in the gallery, Jonathan Dayton and Simeon Baldwin. And don't forget, unless you didn't know, that Luther Martin was also at the Constitutional Convention, and so this is him defending this group project that he was on. Luther Martin noted that Justice Samuel Chase was accused of saying damn during the James Callender trial, And well, Luther Martin, being Luther Martin, he said that damn could very much be a simile for very, because you could say this is a very good bottle of wine, or you could say this is a damn good bottle of wine. And let's be honest, he probably took a swig of a bottle of wine while he's saying it, because Luther Martin was the perpetual drunk that everyone knew, and you wouldn't know when he wasn't drunk because he wasn't. Luther Martin and Samuel Chase being friends, of course, Luther Martin was going to defend his friend during his impeachment trial. Some years later, in 1810, while Justice Samuel Chase was sitting on the bench, Luther Martin comes stumbling in, drunk as always. And because Samuel Chase didn't forget what Luther Martin has done for him, here's an interesting story. Martin stumbled drunkenly through an insurance case before Samuel Chase. I'm surprised that you can so prostitute your talents, Chase reproved him. Sir, replied Martin, grinning, no doubt creasing his smile. I never prostituted my talents except when I defended you and Colonel Burr. And here he turned to the jury, certainly with a wink, a couple of the greatest rascals in the world. You probably guessed, but, well, spoilers, Samuel Chase, he was found not guilty, and therefore he was not impeached.